imreading.com. Lesson 1. Introducing yourself. Present tense. Question and answer.
Jane is a Yang.
Jane is a Yang.
Is Jane British or American?
American. Jane is a Yang. She's American.
American. Jane is a Yang. She's an American. Is she an Australian?
No, she isn't in Australia. Jane is a Yang. She's American.
Jane is a Yang. She is an American. Who is a Yang?
Jane. Jane is a Yang. She's American.
Jane is a Yang. She is an American. Jane is sitting in the restaurant alone.
She is sitting in the restaurant
Jane
alone.
Sitting with a friend?
No, she isn't. She's sitting in the restaurant alone.
No, she isn't. Jane is sitting in a restaurant alone. Who is Jane sitting with?
She's sitting with no one. She's sitting in the restaurant alone.
Jane is sitting in the restaurant alone. Is Jane sitting in a hotel?
No, she isn't. She's
Jane
sitting in the restaurant alone.
Jane has just arrived in Vietnam.
Jane has just arrived in Vietnam.
Has Jane lived in Vietnam for 6 months?
No, she hadn't lived in Vietnam for 6 months. She had just arrived in Vietnam.
Jane hasn't lived in Vietnam for 6 months. She has just arrived in Vietnam. Where has she just arrived?
Vietnam. She had just arrived in Vietnam.
Vietnam. She has just arrived in Vietnam. Has she just left Vietnam?
No, she hadn't left Vietnam. She had just arrived in Vietnam.
She hasn't left Vietnam. She has just arrived in Vietnam. She walks to a restaurant.
She walked to a restaurant.
Who walks to a restaurant?
Jane. Jane walked to a restaurant.
Jane. Jane walks to a restaurant. Where does she walk to?
A restaurant. She walked to a restaurant.
A restaurant. Jane walks to a restaurant. Does she walk to a cinema?
No, she doesn't walk to a cinema. Jane walked to
No, she doesn't walk to a
restaurant.
cinema. Jane walks to a restaurant. Does Jane walk to a restaurant?
Yeah, Jane walked to a restaurant.
Yes, Jane walks to a restaurant. She walks to a restaurant. Does Jane take a taxi to a museum?
No, she doesn't take taxi to museum. Jane walked to a restaurant.
Jane doesn't take a taxi to a museum. She walks to a restaurant. She knows no one in Vietnam and is sitting by herself.
She knows no one in Vietnam and sitting by herself.
Does Jane have many friends in Vietnam?
No, she doesn't have many friends in Vietnam. She knows no one in Vietnam.
Jane doesn't have many friends in Vietnam. She knows no one in Vietnam. How many people does Jane know in Vietnam?
None. She knows no one in Vietnam.
None. She knows no one in Vietnam. Why is Jane sitting alone?
Because she knows no one in Vietnam.
Because she knows no one in Vietnam. Jane is sitting alone because she knows no one in Vietnam. Jane is feeling a little lonely because she knows no one and has no friends in Vietnam.
Jane is feeling a little lonely because she
Why
knows
is
no
Jane
one and
feeling
has no
lonely?
friend in Vietnam. Because she knows no one and has no friend in Vietnam.
Jane is feeling lonely because she knows no one and has no friends in Vietnam. Is Jane feeling lonely because she has no job?
No, she isn't feeling lonely because she had no job.
No,
She
Jane
knows no
isn't
one
feeling
has.
lonely because
She
she has
feeling
no
lonely
job.
because she
Jane
knows no
is
one
feeling
and has
lonely
no
because
friend
she knows
in
no
Vietnam.
one and has no friends in Vietnam. Does Jane have any friends in Vietnam?
No, she doesn't have any friend in Vietnam. She knows no one
she
and
doesn't
has
have
no
any friends
friend
in
in
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
She knows no one and has no friends in Vietnam. Juan walks in, orders his food, and sits at the table next to James.
Juan walks in, orders his food, and sits at the table next to
Does
James.
Juan sit outside the restaurant at a table?
No, Juan doesn't sit outside the restaurant at the table.
No, he sits at the table
She's
next to James.
at the table next to James.
Does Juan walk out of the restaurant?
No, Juan doesn't walk out of the restaurant. Juan
No,
walks
he
in,
doesn't walk out of the
orders his
restaurant.
food, and
He
sits
walks
at
in,
the table next to
orders his
James.
food, and sits at the table next to James. Where does Juan sit in the restaurant?
At the table next to James. He sits at the table next to James.
At the table next to Jane. He sits at the table next to James and begins a conversation with Jane. He begins a conversation with Jane.
He began a conversation with James.
Who begins a conversation with Jane?
Juan starts a conversation with James. Juan begins to talk to her.
Juan starts a conversation with Jane. Juan begins to talk to her. Does he finish a conversation with Jane?
No, she doesn't finish a conversation with James. He began a conversation
Juan
with
doesn't
James.
finish his conversation with
He
Jane.
began to
He
talk
begins
to her.
Talk to Jane. What does Juan begin with Jane?
A conversation. Juan starts talking to James.
Juan starts
He
talking
starts
to
a
Jane. He starts a
conversation to her.
conversation with her. Juan asks Jane questions to get to know her better.
Juan asks James questions to get to know her better. No, Juan doesn't ask James questions to hire her for a job. Juan asks James questions to get to know her better.
Juan asks Jane questions to get to know her better. Does Juan tell Jane a story to amuse Jane?
No, Juan doesn't tell James a story to amuse him. Juan asks James questions to get to know her better.
Jane tells Juan her story and why she is in
James tells
Vietnam.
Juan her story and why she's in Vietnam.
Does Jane refuse to talk to Juan?
No, James doesn't refuse to talk to Juan.
No, Jane
tells Juan her story and why she's
Jane
in
tells
Vietnam.
Juan her story and why she is in Vietnam. What does Jane tell Juan?
Her story and why she's in Vietnam. James tells Juan her story and why she's in Vietnam.
Jane tells Juan her story and why she is in Vietnam. Does Jane sing songs to Juan?
No, doesn't James sing songs to Juan. James tells Juan her story and why she's in Vietnam.
Jane tells Juan her story and why she is in Vietnam. She tells Juan her story and why she is in Vietnam.